Hey guys, it's Gaming Down right here. Alright, what do you want to call me? Today I'm making a video. I know it's been like a long time since I made a video, but trust me, this is worth it, and you're about to find out why. Now behind me is a computer case. Not just any computer case, but my computer case. This is the Corsair 200R, and this is going to be my first PC build. I'm going to be bringing you along the journey, basically, for my first PC build. I'm now going to pretty much list off all the parts, and then we're going to get to making the computer, and I'm going to show you guys, if it works or not for my first PC build, and we're going to see what happens. So, let's go ahead and get on to the parts. This is the X47 Gaming AORUS motherboard. It supports Ryzen APUs, which is what I'm using today. I do not actually have a graphics card as of now. I'm going to save it for one, but the Ryzen APU I do have is pretty good. As for now, I'm going to save it for it, and that'll be good for the graphics card. I'm probably going to get a GTX 1060 6GB. But yeah, I'm not going to go over the specifications. All the Amazon links will be down in the description for you guys if you want to go check the specifications, and I'll list off the total price probably at the end of the video. But this is the price of it right now on Amazon current time. And let's move on to the CPU. For the APU, we're using the Ryzen 3 220G. This is about $100 on Amazon, but I'll list the price right now for you guys. It's clocked at 3.5 GHz, has 4 cores, and can be overclocked, but I don't think I'm going to be doing any of that as I'm using the stock cooler. For the RAM, we have the Corsair LPX Vengeance. It is 2 4GB sticks, and is clocked at 2666 MHz. Here's the price of it. Amazon, of course, as everything else, will be down in the description. Yeah, it wasn't that expensive, so I'm pretty happy about that. And I actually did originally have it at 2160, I do believe, but upgraded to 2666 because that's the max supported by the APU. I figured I would just go with that. For storage, we're looking at the Kingston 240GB SSD. There's not much to say about an SSD, except SSDs are pretty fast. It can apparently run at 6 gigabits per second and is 2.5 inch. So I believe I had a 240 gig also in my computer downstairs, but honestly I'm fine with an SSD, maybe getting a hard drive later on for bigger games and stuff. For our power supply, we're using the Corsair CX750M or 750M. 750 watt, and has good reviews. It's 80 plus bronze, and it also is fully modular. So there's not much to say about the power supply. It works. And along with the case, we also have these Corsair Quiet Edition AF120 fans, and the case also comes with 2 fans on it. And I don't know what they are, but the case is the 200R, it's a Corsair. I do believe I said that earlier. It has 2 USBs in the front, it has a headphone jack and a mic plug, a restart button, a power button, and it has a lot of places to put fans. There's also, you don't have to screw in the hard drive or SSD or anything. It's just you put it in there and you're fine. And the case came with some screws and some zip ties and stuff, which is really neat. I'm glad they included that. If they didn't, that would suck, because we couldn't mount more fans and stuff. And, zip ties are always nice to have. And of course, these fans are really nice. I got the blue edition, just because I like blue. I mean, the whole channel started off in blue anyway. But yeah, with all these components, I think we're ready to suck the motherboard in. Let's get in. Hey guys, it's Nari. Finally, after so long, finally got the computer up and running, ready for some benchmarking of some type of sorts, and basically we're gonna see how well the computer can perform now. It's been about 3 or 4 weeks since I built the computer. It may have been like just over a month, but we finally got it set up. This is my old computer. The reason it's still here is because I went to record my new computer with my older one, so I have no frame loss in terms of that. Also, there's like a little tiny bug with my APU that I can't really record at 720p, and 1080p recording is just not for an APU, not for an APU. But yeah, we have everything set up here. I'm excited to show you guys exactly what I've done and what you can see in the future for more videos from this Ryzen 3 220G. Let's go and jump into it. Alright, we're now on the BIOS, and because I know you guys won't be able to see the screen so well even with me moving my mic, my camera's just not that great. I'm using the Google Pixel right now, and I'm really afraid that thing's going to get out of focus because that's just what my phone does. I'm recording the screen right now, so here you go. You can actually see the screen. And what's something that is really cool about this is that I've never had a BIOS with a mouse before. I've always had to use arrow keys, even with the Alienware. The Alienware didn't have a BIOS with a mouse on it, which is really neat. Pretty neat. The first thing I had to do when I got this computer is I went to my memory settings, and it was set on disabled, which put my RAM at 2133 when it's clocked at 2666. So if you ever had this problem, I just put it on profile 1, and it put on 2666, the regular clock speed. I don't know any of this overclocking stuff. I don't know how to do any of this. I'm not doing any overclocking for this video. And then the second thing I did was make sure everything's okay. Everything's okay here. I do have fast boot off because I believe that like it temporarily holds the computer in like this weird limbo state, which I don't like. The one thing I do want to state off is what comes with an APU is you have to dedicate a certain amount of RAM, of your actual RAM, to the APU. And so it starts off with 1 gigabyte, and that's just not enough in my opinion. And so you have the options. The way you do it is you go to integrated graphics. It's usually just on auto. You change it to forces, and then it'll say UMA auto, or it should say audio or auto. You put on UMA specified, and you can dedicate any amount of RAM you want to dedicate to your APU. You can go up to 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is just, I don't know why you'd want to do that if you had like 64 gigabytes of RAM. Sure, go ahead and dedicate, or even 32. Go ahead and dedicate 16 gigs. Why do we even have an APU if you're gonna? I don't know. You can also dedicate like 64 megabytes, which is pretty strange. But I went with the good middle half between 1 and 4, since I do have 8 gigabytes. If you would like me to do a video on the best amount of VRAM to dedicate, post on in the comments saying you want me to. I found a really good middle point for me personally, like a good middle point between like the RAM good, like 6 gigabytes of RAM that's actually usable, and 2 gigabytes for the APU is the best option for me. And that's pretty much all I had to do. I've not had any other issues. I've not messed with any overclocking things just because I'm using the original cooler that came with it, the Racepire I think it is. So I'm not gonna mess with any of that. If you'd like me to mess with it in a future video, I'll look around. I'm pretty sure there's an application you can use, which is like the easiest way. It's made by AMD. So I can use that if you want me to do some videos on that later on. I'm not going to do that anytime soon because it's a new build. Then let me know and down in the comments of that too. And let's go ahead and get on to the actual computer. And the benchmarks, my bad. Alright, we're now going to look at benchmarks, and when I say benchmarks, I say about it, it has always worked for me. It's a good kind of statistic for how things kind of run. We're going to be running the user benchmark with everything I've said, 2666 RAM and 2 gigabytes of VRAM on the APU and 6 gigabytes of regular installed RAM. We're going to go ahead and jump in, and it's testing everything here. Let's go ahead and see how everything performs. Alright, the benchmark is finally finished, and I do want to state, if you've never seen user benchmark before, they have like this kind of classification for like how good your rig is. They say for gaming I have a surfboard, which is mostly due to the Vega 8 graphics.
The desktop gets destroyer, I'm gonna guess because the SSD and the processor. As a workstation, it probably says jet ski, probably because the processor is not as good as it could be. But also probably because of the Vega 8 graphics. Not sure what what the workstation is actually for. Multi-core. So multi-core, it is not as good. Okay, there we go. For the actual processor itself, it has an 82.4 percent bench, and it says it's performing way above expectations. That's awesome. I love this processor. I love how fast it is, even combined with the APU. For the graphics, it says it's performing way better than expectations, which is 87%. I think it's because I actually upped the VRAM. But it says for this bench it was 16%. What are you gonna do? It's Vega 8 graphics, it's an APU. But when we move on to games, you might be actually surprised on like how it runs some games, if you've not already seen the Ryzen 3 220G. As you can see, it's averaging around 49.6 and this on 38.6 FPS. It's alright, but I mean, what do you expect? For the SSD, it's saying it's performing lower than expectations. I don't know much about SSDs. I can always swap this out, but I mean, it's working. What can you say? It's at least it's not like a crappy hard drive. And then I have my little external hard drive. That doesn't really matter. And then of course the last thing is the RAM, and it's clocked at 2666. It actually got it, which is great, and it's performing way better than expectations, and is at 94.3. Pretty happy with that. Honestly, just lacking all of it latency, but honestly, I'm pretty happy with this build. We're now going to move on to some games. I'm pretty happy about this. We're going to be testing CSGO, Fortnite, Dirt 3, and Overwatch. We're not going to worry about this one right now. That's for a different video. We're not going to worry about that one right now. Alright, we're now on CSGO, and for heads up, we are using MSI Afterburner to track all the FPS speeds and like just basically that. I'm just worried about FPS speeds, like the minimum, the 1%, I think it is, the 0.1%, 0.01%, and like the maximum and the average. Instead of using the CSGO benchmark, the workshop map that everyone uses, I don't think it's an accurate representation of how the game runs. And also I want to state that I'm running this at pretty much all low settings except for anti-aliasing, which I have at 4 times. I would put it at 8 times, but 4 times is a good midpoint. And of course, we're just gonna run into, I guess, just a regular deathmatch game. Play for about 10 minutes and see what our FPS gets to. Kicking it off with CSGO, we got about 10 minutes of a deathmatch game, and it averaged around 79.3 frames per second. We got a 1% low of 53.7 frames per second, and a 0.1% low of 33.9 frames per second. Honestly, throughout the gameplay, I never experienced any hiccups or stuttering. It's a pretty playable experience, and if you wanted more FPS, you could tone down the anti-aliasing or even turn down the resolution. If you're one of those players that plays 4-3, you would have a perfectly good experience with this. I believe that you could play esports with this processor and have a pretty good time with it. Alright, the next game we're going to test is going to be Dirt 3. We're just going to be doing this simple little benchmark test they have on here. They have a little benchmark test. We're doing this on 1080p, and it's on the automatic preset, which is pretty much just all of these. Everything's pretty much medium. Characters are off because I hate characters, except for ground cover, which is high. And then we're going, and also ambient occlusion's high and cloth is high. And then we're going to move on to the highest preset, Ultra, with characters off because no one likes characters, and just for funsies, see how that runs. So let's go ahead and do this benchmark test. Now for Dirt 3 and the 2-minute benchmark, at the medium automatic settings, we got an average frame rate of 73.0 frames per second, a 1% low of 56.3 frames per second, and a 0.1% low of 3.3 frames per second. Honestly, this wasn't that noticeable, and as for a racing game, you wouldn't really see any of this. But yeah, it was a pretty playable experience as for the benchmark. Now moving on to the Ultra, just for the jokes, it averaged around 33.1 frames per second, and that is really crazy to see. It got a 1% low of 28.7 frames per second, and a 0.1% low at 3.5 frames per second, which is funny because it was actually, the 0.1% low was higher than the other one, by a 0.2 frames per second difference. Honestly, if you wanted to play this game and you could maintain a Ultra preset at 30 frames per second average, then you could go ahead and do that and have a good time. But if you want to hit that 60 mark, you can tone down the settings a little bit. I'm sure you'd have a great time racing in this game. Alright, for our next game, we're doing Fortnite. We're going to do two tests. We're going to do one at 1080p and one at 720p. I have this game running at high anti-aliasing, but like I said, we're just going to go from 1080p to 720p, and this first test is going to be 1080p. Let's go ahead and jump into it. The game everybody loves. In about 13 minutes, we got an average frame rate of 56.5 frames per second. At 1% low, we got 42.4 frames per second, and at 0.1% low, we got a 21.1 frames per second. Now this was 1080p, but in 720p, in about a 10-minute session, we have an average frame rate at 98.6 frames per second, a 1% low at 57.8 frames per second, and a 0.1% low at 20.5 frames per second. Honestly, I would stick to 720p, and that anti-aliasing also helps in this game. I would not turn off anti-aliasing because there's so many jagged corners with this engine. I don't know if it's the Unreal Engine or what, but it's your best bet to keep that on. In 720p, I exceeded it. I didn't have any hiccups or anything like that. It was amazing, and yeah. And for the last game we'll be testing today, it'll be Overwatch. We're playing on the lowest settings right now, except for render quality, render scale, my bad. That's at 100%. And also, I had to turn anti-aliasing off, guys. This game's just way too hectic sometimes. But we're gonna go ahead and jump into a quick play match and see how it does. As for Overwatch, in this 8-minute quick play session, we got an average frame rate of 56.0 frames per second, a 1% low of 39.5 frames per second, and a 0.1% low of 8 frames per second. I would consider this a pretty playable session, in my opinion, but if you wanted to get more of a competitive edge, I would tone it down to 720p, even though it doesn't really matter. Honestly, this was pretty playable, and I had a good time anyway. And with pretty much that concludes our PC build video. I'm really excited that I got to build my own computer. It's been forever. I've been saying it ever since. I've been having issues with my Alienware overheating. I've been saying I've been wanting to build my own computer because pre-builds are just not my thing. Not anymore anyway. But now I have this awesome PC and I can't wait to upgrade it. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to put in it next, but you might find it somewhere. It's going to be a graphics card when I'm going to put in next. Eventually I'm going to upgrade the processor. But yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. I want you to try to guess what graphics card I'm going to try to get for this. It's going to be a couple months, and I'll make a video about that graphics card and how it performs well with the Ryzen 3 220G, and eventually then the processor, but that'll be a long time from now. Until then, I have one more thing to do. It's kind of sloppy, but yeah. Finally got my stickers on there. Peace out, guys.